Hello, everyone. Hello, hello. Can you confirm you can hear us okay from the other side? We'll just wait a couple of minutes to let people join, and then we'll get started. Thank you for joining. Hello, Johan. Good to see you. Cool, 16 people and growing. Let's wait a few more minutes before we get started, and then we'll kick it off. If you don't mind, we just get started with a quick poll. So I will send you a link now, and you will be able to vote on two questions. It's more to better understand who you are, and so we can better drive the discussion with Thomas tonight. So let me share my screen so we can see the result together. So if you can go to the link I shared on the chat and help us understand first, what is your current role? Awesome. We start seeing responses. That's cool. Cool, a lot of PM people. Great to see fellow people. Sweet. All right, mostly a product management crowd now. That's great. Let's wait another minute maybe, just to see things consolidating. All right, let's go to your second question. Why did you decide to join tonight? So if you can share in a few words why you wanted to join this meetup tonight. So again, better drive the discussion for us. If you continue on the same link, that should be okay. Boom. That's great. Conto, yes. Yeah, Conto people in the...
There should be a couple here.
Yes. Reposition, connect, learning, great. Anything more specific to the topic of tonight? Why principal product manager? Grow in my current role, yeah, learn. Trends in France, sounds pretty aligned. You're back? Yes, we're back. Decide on your career. I think that's a pretty good topic. Learn about the PM role. Future PM in Conto. Connect, respect, careers. All right, good stuff, good stuff. Let's roll for a couple more seconds, and next we'll get started. Cool. Thank you, everyone, for playing the game. That's great to see why did you join tonight and see live. Have a bit of interaction. I hope we get pizza and beer at the end. I hope we could. But yeah, it's so yeah, we are back with a very different setup. So if you attended the meetup before, you know it's all about sharing experiences. It's about interactivity. But due to the current context, of course, we had to adjust. But still, as you can see, we are still together with Thomas. You can see them, but there is Thomas, Laure, and Shubham on the backstage who are helping us to manage this live stream. So thanks to them as well. And so, yeah, hopefully you will get the most of a regular product stories, even if it's a different setup. Let's continue to make it interactive. So through the chat, you'll be able to ask us questions, and we'll make a few breakouts during the talk. So we can take it from you. The goal is really to share our experiences and not to do a masterclass, because I think there is as many experiences as there is people in that room. Thomas, do you mind getting started by introducing yourself?
Sure. So I joined Conto 3.5 years ago, so at the very beginning as a first PM. So maybe one word about Conto. We are a neobank for small and medium companies. We launched our product in 2017 in July, and since then we grew quite fast. We have now 100,000 customers, so businesses who have an account with us, and we are live in France, Germany, Spain, and Italy. So, and it's a really fast-growing company because we're a bit more than 250 at the moment. And so, yeah, I joined as a first product manager, then I became head of product after a few months, and well, this summer I switched to an IC position as a product principal. So that's what we're going to discuss.
Cool. IC, for everyone, individual contributor, but we'll come back to that in a minute. And so Arnaud Breton, I'm at Screen. At Screen, we're doing an application security management platform, hoping to help security and engineering team to secure their web application. Like Thomas, I joined as the first product manager. I grew my way up through three years with the company as the head of product, and more recently, that's why Thomas and I connected. I switched to the principal PM role as well. And so when we saw each other going through this track, we were like, okay, we need to do something. And so here we are tonight. Maybe before diving deep into the topic, I just wanted to do a very brief introduction on something which is key for understanding what we are going to talk about tonight, which is the two different tracks. So you mentioned IC, Thomas, and the management track. So if you're based in France, which I think a lot of you are, but thanks to that virtual meetup, we can now reach new audiences. It's very typical, but if you're excellent in your job, the only way to continue growing is by taking responsibilities. So things like hiring people, managing people. And so at the end of the day, the time you have to really have to train and to grow in your subject matter expertise become very limited, to the point where you become a real leader and where it's actually your team doing the work, which is great. But there is, especially in engineering, other tracks since a few years. And so now it's actually interesting to see that coming up in the product management field. I think it's fairly new in France. As far as we know, there's no one else really playing that role in French startups. But if you are a principal PM in your company, we want to know you. And so there is this other track called the IC, or individual contributor, where this time you really become a subject matter expert. And so the thing is, you can grow to the same level than a person growing on the management side. And so it's really to recognize that to grow, you have two different tracks. The management part, which is necessary or required to grow a company and to make sure people are happy, growing and stuff. And the other one, which is really subject matter expertise. And so for us tonight, it's really about product management first. But because our company has two different businesses, for Conto it's a fintech, for Screen it's security and software development, we also have built over the past years that expertise in our field. So hopefully that definition helps you understand where we come from. I think we have a very good first question from Clara. Yeah, oops, sorry about that. Could you share more about your diplomas, engineer or business? Thomas?
So I went to business school, which I think here is absolutely irrelevant. And if we look at the team we have at Conto, we have as many engineers as we have people who come from a business degree. And this is really not something we look at when we hire. But I mean, now I've been working for nearly 10 years, and I really think that especially for this kind of role and the kind of company we work at, it's not something that matters in the end. I don't know if you share that.
Yeah, pretty agreed. I think I totally agree with Thomas. I think for us at Screen, because the product is so technical, so we talk with developers, we talk with security engineers. So obviously, we have to be deep into the thing. And so myself, I'm a former software developer. So I studied computer science, was a full-time developer before turning to product management. And thanks to my background, I decided to continue working on more tech tools. So my background is helping a lot, obviously, for the purpose of Screen. But I think sometime I learned my way the hard way to find the balance between how much I should go into the details of the technicalities. So yeah, it's a huge helper for me at Screen, but sometimes it's a drawback. Thank you, Clara, for the question. Another question, could you also please, from Dylan, could you also please share how you progressed into a product management role?
Sure. So after I graduated, so it was in 2010, I joined, my first job was being a product manager at Withings, so more in hardware. I did that for nearly 4 years, and then I switched to other things. I did music, I did sales, and at some point I wanted to get back to product management, and I met with Conto founders. And it was the very beginning. There was less than 10 people in the team back then, and I was super impressed by their ambition and kind of the craziness of like just okay, let's just build a bank.
Yeah.
So I joined as a first product manager, but in the very early days, which was a very different job back then. And as soon as we launched our beta and publicly, we saw that we had a lot of traction. So we got to hire more and more PMs. And when we were, I think, 5 people in the product team, so PMs and designers, I switched to the head of product position, which I held for a bit more than 2 years until I had 12 PMs working in the team with me, and then the switch to product principal. So I think it's a little bit similar to what you did at Screen. So joining as a first PM, doing a lot of PM work, switching to a management role, but very gradually, and then switching back to IC.
Yeah, definitely. On my end, so I was, as I say, the full-time developer, and I had this frustration for quite a while where I was building stuff, shipping features, but I was losing the sense of why I'm doing that, how people are using it. And I was not necessarily working with people who could give me that visibility. And on the other end, I also knew that I really wanted to be customer-facing, talking with people. I really love the community aspect. That's one of the reasons we started ProductStories. And so I found this other job, which is not so common in France, back in the days at least, which is called developer evangelism. So basically, people would necessarily not me saying it like that, but it's marketing for developers. So I was at Mailjet at the time, an email service provider, and we had an API product, but we were mostly selling to developers. So we had to tune and fine-tune our marketing. So for example, reaching out to them in conferences or in the right medias. So I was working with Shubham at the time. I was on the backstage now. And after a few months, we realized that if we continued that way, we wouldn't succeed because the product needed heavy attention. So I switched, that was my shift into product management at the time. So I overlooked the product. So again, it was a very technical product, so I really played on my background. With some step back on what I'm doing at Screen now, I think I was doing more the job of an engineering manager than a product manager. So now I'm really at Screen positioning more and more on the left, like I'm doing a lot of product marketing, positioning, and really working on the experience of the product rather than how is it implemented. There's another question, and maybe let's move on after. Product management has as many descriptions as the company that offer the job. What are the core essential skills that is common to all and that you look for in collaborators? Very good question.
Yeah. So one thing that's interesting is that since I joined Conto, what we look for in product managers changed in many different ways. But yeah, there is a core of soft skills and some hard skills that we are always looking for. I think it comes down to curiosity, which is something really broad. But here I would say just being passionate about product or how good products are built. And yeah, that can be very broad. It's just being paying great attention to details and just being curious of how things work. I think there is, I would include in curiosity some empathy. I mean,
Sure.
of course, but I would put it in that area. The second one would be probably everything related to execution. And in there, I would include like leadership skills, communication skills, but just being able to pull like a very big project and doing it in a smooth way where you know how to pay attention to all the stakeholders and just being careful to everything. Because yeah, you also need to deliver. And the third thing I think is about culture. We want people who fit with our culture, who want to take part in improving everything related to that. So yeah, I think those three areas are what we always look for. And then depending on the moment in the history of the company, we looked at sometimes a bit more of these, sometimes more of that, and we always adjust. But in the end, yes, it's about that.
Maybe for context, because I think that they help to understand the context at Conto, they run with the squad model. So they have this model where PM are embedded in squad with engineers with a clear scope and mission. So sometimes I guess the background of the person help, maybe more technical for some part of the core banking, for example.
Yeah, we have a little bit of that. We also have we know that some people are really great at project management and making things move forward at a great pace, or we know that some people will be great in everything related to user research, and that's also one thing that makes it really interesting with a growing team like that. Is that you will have to combine these strengths within the teams. In each squad, we have usually more than one PM. So yeah, we try to combine and try to get the best of both worlds. And usually it works pretty well.
Cool. Yeah. Maybe I could add to that. I think the trend we are more or less seeing from my perspective is the trend where the PM is overviewing the delivery, I would say. So really guiding the rest of the team, designers, developers, in what to build. So but generally called in France product owner, but there's still the product part in there. I think for companies like Conto and Screen, we are more pursuing a model where the PM is more very close to the customer, on the field, talking with them, collecting feedback, collecting assets, malaxing all of that, and coming back to the team with a vision on where we should go. So I really see, generally my vision is if you take a given squad, a PM is the product captain. You have generally also an engineering captain, maybe sometimes a design captain. And together with the team, they have a clear mission, scope, and they are chasing that day in, day out. But the contribution of the PM is really to have the customer and market visibility on what we should ship next, because there's so little time and so many things to do. But if you start getting everywhere, your product will probably land on the right things. And that's a very hard things to do, of course. Maybe I saw some other question, but maybe let's move on and let's revisit. I saw your question, Johan, Mathieu, thanks for your question. Let's revisit them in a few minutes. And that's great. We also already have this level of interaction. For us, that's really important to interact with you online and not just be talking during 1 hour. That would be boring. So thanks everyone for the question. That's really amazing. Maybe moving on, what would be interesting is for us to define what are our key responsibilities as principal PM, because I think we just touched on the general PM thing, but maybe here let's be more specific on the principal.
Yeah. So I will really speak for about my experience because it's probably very different everywhere again. But when we decided that I would take that role, we decided to focus on three things. The first one is product strategy and product vision. So I'm working alongside our CPO on making sure that our strategy is clear and always up to date, and that our vision is clear. And not only is clear, but everyone is aligned around it. And the way it happens is that we used to have a system where we had quarterly roadmaps. So every 3 months we would spend 2 or 3 weeks just revisiting our roadmap, and it was usually a quite complex process because you have to involve all the stakeholders, and it's like never-ending process that you have to do again and again. And
as you grow, it becomes more and more.
It becomes more and more complicated, and when you see that it becomes more complicated, usually it means that probably that your strategy and your vision are not as clear as you think. And we thought that one way to make sure that this is clear is that we move away from this quarterly system to have just one, like a list of things we work on with goals and the success we define. And if our strategy and vision are clear, that should be a smooth process. So we're getting there. We stopped doing quarterly roadmaps, and we've stopped a month ago. So we'll see how it goes. But already, I think we are much clearer on that. So that's the first part of the job. The second part is
just to stop on that part, maybe. So would you say you own the overarching strategy of the company, and then you delegate it back into the several squad and let them autonomy to decide what to do within their scope, and still aligning with the overall?
I wouldn't say I'm the owner of it. The actual owner is our CPO.
Okay.
And the way to get to that clear strategy and vision, we want it to be as bottom-up as possible. And that's a shift in our culture. We used to have a mix between top-down and bottom-up things that were more on the top-down side. And now we really want to change that because we are growing expertise in the product team around many different areas of our product. And it's very important that this expertise is feeding the definition of the strategy and the vision. So I work a lot with PMs on that. I work also a lot with other teams at Conto, like operations, customer support, all different teams to work on that. But yeah, I think it's a great way for us to make sure that we get to the right balance of bottom-up and top-down things.
Yeah, but you're still on the rails and chasing the right thing for Conto, but still people feel empowered to contribute to the greater.
And there is a great part of that role is just influential communication and just convincing people, because it's very easy to come up with a strategy and a vision and just say, okay, this is going to be this, but you need to make sure that people are on board with it, and that's where it gets trickier. And that's part of my role. And but we really do it as a team. We have different teams involved in that, but I'm trying to contribute a lot to that process.
Cool.
Sorry. So there was a second part. That one is already significant, but the second one is more about continuous improvement. So at the moment we have, I think, 14 PMs in the team. We also have 6 product designers, and we have 2 people working on product marketing. And my role is really to make sure that we are always working on all the frictions and all the problems that happen. And as we grow pretty fast, problems happen all the time. We try to make it as smooth as possible for everyone, but there is always this thing that changed and doesn't work anymore. And we really want to, we want to avoid to be in a system where you have a few managers who think about how other people should work and say, okay, from now on, you're going to do this that way, rather than making sure we really look every day at all the very little problems that keep on happening, or frictions that people are not happy with, and that we solve them on a very short scale, And what's very interesting about being the product principal in this organization is that I get to help not only each team improve in their practice and get better at what they're doing, but also helping them work together. And we interact a lot, of course, between designers, product marketing, and product management. And having this cross-cutting role actually helps a lot, just making all the relationship and the collaboration much smoother. So, and that's just something when we have tools that are related to our methodology. So we do a lot of things around the lean methodology. So we have problem-solving methods that we use for that, and I just make sure that we do that continuously, and that all the efforts we do are paying off, and we're just basically experimenting on the way we work every day and making sure that all the changes we make have the right impact, and just the effect in the end is quite hard to measure, but it's just making sure that we continuously improve as a team.
Cool.
And the third and last part is one that I think would be very interesting to discuss. It's actually doing proper PM work. So one frustration that I got when I was head of product, and I didn't really realize it before switching back to an IC role, was that in the end I stopped doing actual PM work and building things. I was doing it through other people, but which is very interesting, but very different as well. And just getting back to doing just working on product initiatives and features, and just getting my hands dirty again on this is actually super useful to also feed the two first areas of the role.
Totally.
So they really work together, and in the end, that's just like a super fulfilling role because it's super complete. It covers a lot of different areas in product, and so far I'm super happy with the change.
Cool. Yeah, and maybe we can piggyback, and I can share my thoughts on that as well. But piggyback on the question from Mathieu. Mathieu, thanks for your question. How did you decide between being an individual contributor versus doing more management? And I think with everything you just described, I think the answer is we wouldn't have time, or we would have to build a team to do that. But at the end of the day, as head of product, we couldn't do that, right?
Yeah. And the decision was actually an interesting process because the way it happened is that our CTO became our CPO in July. And so the first thing he did was kind of an audit of the team and just looking at what works and what doesn't. And one of the things that was clearly not perfect is that I had 12 product managers as direct reports. So I wasn't able to spend enough time with each of them to help them grow their skills and just help them on a daily basis.
And you're a good manager.
Yeah, exactly. I was doing my best, but 12 is really difficult. So we decided to go to a more, to add some hierarchy in the team and have lead product managers, and to manage the lead product managers to have a head of product.
But will not be you then.
So we discussed it.
Okay.
But there was another opportunity. So our CPO also needed someone to help him with the three topics we mentioned. So there was those two opportunities, but clearly it was a tough choice. When he presented to me what he had in mind for the product principal role, on one side I was very excited about it because it sounded very interesting, and on the other hand there was something wrong with it, and it took me some time to understand what was not so great. And after a few days, I realized that this is mostly about the preconception that when you leave the management track, you leave the golden path. You leave the thing that seems to be the best way to progress in your career. And I mean, I think it's a common preconception that to grow in your career, you have to manage people. But I also realized that this is not because you leave the management track that you won't get back to it later on.
Yeah.
And actually, I used a mapping of PM skills that another PM did, and I was like, okay, where am I below par, on par, above par?
Yeah.
And if I switch to that role, am I going to work on the thing that I really care about? And it was a really good match. And I thought that actually growing these skills will just put me in a much better situation if I want to get back to the management track.
Yeah.
So I really see this as something that can be like changing over time.
Yeah.
And I thought that maybe some companies would consider that as I left the management track, I would not be suited for managing management roles later on. And I came to the conclusion that if they think that, this is just probably not the right place.
Yeah,
so
fit.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, that sounds fair. I don't have any much things to add to that because I think the good part of this discussion is we share a very common history, pure coincidence, not like we synced a lot before. We came up to the same conclusion almost at the same time. For me, obviously, things are a bit different because the scale of Screen is a bit smaller than Conto. So we are 60 people at the moment. So we are 2 PM today, 1 designer. So the product group is not as big as for Thomas, but still the role became a need. So we have exactly the same organization as well. I do report today to initially our VP of engineering, who turned into VP of product engineering. You know, if you're looking at this recording, hello. And so we came up with that definition of the role where you really needed someone to continue overlooking the product strategy. The continuous improvement is definitely something important, smaller scale again, we are 2 PM today, so I don't have to spend as much time as figure out the different interaction between the team. You also, and I think the PM work for me was, to your point, was really the key to jump into that role, because otherwise I felt I would be working with people, guiding people, but not doing the job myself. So not learning and transferring my knowledge down to my peers. And also because that's the exciting part of the job for me. So the action, the part. I think we didn't touch on the topic we are contributing to, but we are not like working on it's not like side project we are running. Generally, a very strategic topic for the company, a more mid-term, long-term topic. So for my part, for example, I'm bootstrapping a new product line at Screen, which would hopefully, if we do our job right, launch by the same period of the time next year. So that's a long work that requires heavy collaboration, heavy positioning. So the good part is I'm doing a full stack job. So I'm doing a bit of product marketing, a bit of PM, and because the nature of Screen, a bit of engineering as well. So I'm already learning a lot, to your point. I'm 30 years old, so I still think I have to learn a lot of things. So yeah, that role was very fulfilling in that part. On the other end, on the management part, to your point, Thomas, I think I was not, at this time, and again, I'm not excluding to come back to that track later on, but I think at this stage of my career and looking at who I am, I think I'm not necessarily the best people manager. And so that was not doing great for my team to keep me in a position like that, because I think there's way more skilled people out there to make them grow, to help them day to day. And so that's what someone to cover the management part from me, until we probably do the same thing on Conto, which is probably hire another head of product or director of product at some point in the development of Screen. Maybe let's do a break here. Do you have any other question? If you have any question, please post them now and we'll look at them on the chat. There is one already. There was maybe a question from Johan we didn't answer earlier. So he said, based on your experience, what would be your main recommendation to build up a PM team in a fast-growing company? For example, from 1 PM to many. What topic?
Good question.
I can try.
I think.
Yeah, what you think. So for my part, Johan, I think today I see the growth of product always as a function of the growth of engineering, in the sense that if you look at the day-to-day of a PM, if you don't have a team to work with you and to build up all the ideas, all the requests you're gonna go through, that's a job where you're gonna dream. And it's great to dream, but at some point you also want to deliver and achieve things. So if you're a PM alone on your side and nobody is here to work with you, to support you, to help you build all the things which you think are right, that's probably not gonna end well. This is what's my perspective. On the other end, I think if it's really depend on your organization. If you have a siloed product team and an engineering product team, probably the two are going to grow apart, and you're going to grow the PM team depending on the market you want to address, depending on the ambition of the company and the roadmap. And so on the other end, if you grow with squads, you're going to start to map the areas of your product, the different missions, and the different investment. We think a lot as investment at Screen today. So we have, let's say in the bank, we have 100. Where do we spend those hundreds? And so you're going to start popping up squad. Some are customer facing, so they build products which are used directly by users, consumers. Sometimes they are second line, so they enable other squad to do their job better. And the way I think about this model is to build autonomy. So have all the skills required for those squads to do their mission in a full-fledged way. And so you probably need some PM in that. So that's where you can grow the group as well. I definitely believe also there is what I would call tonight a surrogate PM. So not a PM per se, but PM as a role. So someone who plays that role in the team. So that can be a designer, a developer, maybe a product marketer, maybe a salesperson. And you own that responsibility to decide where we should head out next. So it doesn't have to be necessarily a full-time person for some scopes. To use a concrete example, today at Screen, we have a lot of security. So what kind of protection we should release, where we should, what kind of vulnerabilities we should continue to cover. And so, for example, the PM part today is done by our CTO, who's not a PM, but plays that surrogate role until we decide to hire someone for that scope, maybe one day.
Okay, maybe not a recommendation, but more a tip that is really based on my two experience at Withings and Conto. It's to hire PMs with backgrounds that are as diverse as possible and that work really well together. When you're at the beginning and that you're growing fast, I think product management is something messy, and all the scopes are quite unclear. And having people with diverse background mean that they will complement each other and they will learn a lot from each other. And at Withings, we were for a while we were 4 PMs, and it's really funny because we're still very good friends today, and we keep on discussing a lot about work and the way we do things, and just like we did back then. And while as you're defining what product management is in your company at that moment in the history of the company, having people who will bring diverse things and are able to exchange a lot and learn from each other. And I think that was really the case at Conto, like the 3-4 first PMs. We exchanged a lot, we learned a lot from each other, and I think that helped us on the long run a lot.
Cool. Yeah, I think I displayed your question, Dylan, because I think Thomas was touching on it. What tips would you give to someone who is trying to reposition from an engineering product design field into PM? I think diversity of background is a need. I can speak on that one maybe from an engineering product design. I think if you want to get to do the job of a PM, just start collaborating with the PM already there. Hopefully there is some with you, and go talk to customer, go understand what they want, build your own vision. I don't think PM are men or women in the middle. They're not just here to take requests and pass them on. They're here to take them, aggregate, refine them. So maybe sometimes you have a ton of requests, but it's still not clear what you're going to solve. So your job is to dig into that. And so, be expose to those customers, build your vision, and make recommendation on where the product should go. And I think that would already give you a clear sense of what it'd be like to be a PM.
Yeah, and just before I was mentioning that when I was hesitating between moving to the IC role or not, I looked at a mind map of PM skills made by a PM from Stripe called Shreyas Doshi. And I think in this case, it's something very practical that could be interesting to do is just look at this mapping, see where you're good at, there will be a lot of things you don't know anything about, but at least you will know what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, and what could be interesting for you to learn while doing this transition.
Yeah.
And this mapping is really complete and well done. And I come back to it very often just to see like, okay, am I really learning in the areas I want to learn and make progress? So yeah, I would really recommend that.
Cool. Yeah, but I definitely want to look into that now. We share the link of the profile of Shreyas, and indeed he posts very, very thorough thread. So for me, it's one of my main source of learning these days. Is really amazing. Hopefully, he's watching us now.
Maybe we have people from Stripe watching. So.
Yeah, Romain, if you're here, hello. A question from Thoughtful Makeup Sessions. Do you expect the French scene to shift to be more appreciative of the IC path? And I think that's a good transition to our next topic.
I think that the shift is beginning to happen. And we are a good example at Conto. So we started having these two clear tracks, I would say, like a year ago. But it's not just because you declare that you have two paths that people first understand it, want to be part of it. And it's actually it's a long-term effort. And our HR and people team did a great work on that. Because as we mentioned, there is this preconception that management is the best track, and that's still pretty much everywhere. And even now that I moved to the principal role, a lot of people tell me that I somehow downgraded to an IC role, but the thing is we also create that environment where you don't feel like that. It goes from very practical things like compensation. So at Conto, it's very clear that in the expert track, you can actually have a better salary than being on the management track. And we actually took the example of you can be an expert that has a higher salary than your manager. That is absolutely fine, and that we should make sure that it happens. Also that as an IC, you have the conditions to do your job well. You're able to have influence where you need to have it. You need to have support from people in the management track as well. So you need to combine a lot of things to make it work. So I think we are quite advanced in that, in the sense that it starts to work for us. We have signaled that it's happening in other companies. So at Screen, it's obviously the case. You told me that they also have something similar at Algolia. So I think there is a trend. It's going in the right direction, but just shifting the overall mindset will take a lot of time, I think. It's probably much more advanced in the US than it's in France now, I think, but it's our responsibility to catch up. And
that's where we're here tonight.
Yeah, and the thing is, I think we both have, we're both really happy with what we're doing as individual contributors. We have the right environment for it, and now I think it's also a matter of time for it to be just much more common in the industry.
Yeah, and I think down the road, hopefully, Uday, you're in a context where you can have this kind of discussion with your managers, your leadership. But I think at the end of the day, at least for my part, it came down to what is my biggest contribution to Screen. So, of course, I could have continued in the management track and continue hiring people and doing my all the other things on the side. But that was not where I had the biggest impact. And I love to talk about impact. I love to have impact on things. So this path was a natural one, and I think if you frame it that way, and if you look, I mean, you probably, if you never heard about this one, the manager versus the IC schedule from Paul Graham, I think, from Y Combinator.
Make your time, manage your time.
Yeah, make your time, manage your time. Thanks. And so if you look at that, like just at the end of the day, it's a sum of hours, and there's no magic. I mean, you can push it hard by working overnight. You can get better at your job, so it takes less time to do some stuff. But at the end of the day, you have only so many hours. So if you want to do your job properly, at some point you need to choose your priorities. And for us, I think we made that choice of saying, okay, we're ready to give up the management part for different reasons, but all that reclaimed time we have now, we are going to invest it heavily into where we think we are the best for our current stage, our current company, the challenge of the company at this time. And as you may know, in a startup, that change quite fast. So what is challenging today might not be challenging tomorrow, or will be even more challenging. And maybe a year from now, we won't be the right people to do that. So let's see how far we can push it. But yeah, for us, I think it really came down to, for me at least, I don't know if you share that, Thomas, it really came down to where I had the most impact for Screen.
Yeah, and about like being appreciative of the IC path, I think it's really, I mean, it has to be in the culture of the company. One of my concern when I did the transition was that a lot of people told me like, you're probably going in a closet. Like you have the title, you have a title, you have a very interesting mission, but it will be really hard for you to make an impact and have influence because you don't have you're like in terms of hierarchy, you're not above people, so they just won't follow you. And so we discussed that a lot with our CPO, and it was like, okay, if you are in an individual contributor role, I think it's the responsibility of your manager to make sure that you have the right environment to do it and to succeed in the role. And it's your own responsibility to like just make the most out of it, and just also it's not because you're an IC that you work alone in a dark room. You're actually also in the middle of everything. So yeah, you have to make the most of it, and the combination of your manager helping you have an impact and you doing your best, that's when it really works. And when it works, other people around see that it works. So yeah, we're just advocating for IC roles by doing that.
Oh, and I think you just so of course this talk is not about saying go become an IC because that's the only way out. I think as Thomas just said, it's the combination of both that is successful. And it's two different skills, two different tracks, two different outcomes, but combined together, I think it's indeed super powerful. Do you mind if we jump to that topic of influence? Because I think it's key to our success and to the success of our teams.
Mm-hmm.
And I think then we'll take a few questions because we're already at 48 minutes, time flies. So yeah, let's wrap up on that topic and next take a few questions.
Mm-hmm. So on influence, I think what's interesting is there is something also about seniority and experience within the company as well. That I think for in both our mission, it's something that is very important. Is that we've been in the company for a while. We know the process, we know people, we know the industry, and that makes us relevant for that IC role. And I think if we would just hire someone from the outside for that role, it would be a really complicated mission for them. And as we have this history with the company and we are legit in the role, we can have influence. And it's easier to have that influence, both on how we work, on like topics like strategy or something like that. And yeah, I think that's something that's quite key when we talk about product principle and generally expert roles in product. I think there is a risk of being a kind of consultant, like the person that someone drops in your team and that will tell you how to do things, or what you should do differently and stuff. If you're not legit to the team, that's just not going to work.
Yeah.
So I think it's quite interesting to see like how we created the environment for this to work. And in my case, so I have like a quite long history in the team, and I know all the PMs really well, so it works well. And I think that's why it's very interesting to see how it's something that you grow over time in the company. You just don't just you're not just dropped in the team.
Yeah, true. How do you make the motion so that whenever people feel they face a challenge, they turn down to you? Product challenge.
That's an interesting one, because I think it comes back to what I was doing with when I had a management position. It's being able to give relevant and useful feedback, showing them that you know how to do things and that you can help them. And it's really about just sharing knowledge. And I think it's more like tips and I more feel like a chef who knows how to cook things and can give like very detailed tips rather than just I'm going to teach you how to be a better PM. So yeah, they ask me a lot of questions when they have doubts, and usually it's more about experience. I think knowing the company really well as well helps, of course. So I would just say it's just being legit in their eyes. But while you answer, I'll think about what makes me legit in there.
Maybe a follow-up question, if you don't mind, is also how do you... I lost my train of thought. Sorry about that. No, doesn't come back. We'll come back. So yeah, maybe on that, I think I think the hard part for me, and I'd love to hear it from you, is to let go, because you transition from a role. So for me, I had a different experience than you in the recent months, because I was still at the beginning of the year, I was still doing the PM work, and then Cyril, hello Cyril, if you're looking at this recording, Cyril joined us, so he really took over a scope out of me, so the core product, I would say. And then, but you have this feeling of letting it go, because it's not you doing the job anymore. So people will do better than you, will do in other ways. And I think this influence also comes with the fact that not everything you say might not be heard and understood and applied. And so I think for me at least, it's a hard emotion to deal with at the moment. Like you think you have the right answer to some problem, but you're not the one who's going to do it. So you just try to find ways to convince people that that's the right thing to do. And sometimes you're wrong and you learn it the other way, or others come with the right answers. How do you feel with that?
Well, in some ways, I actually don't let go at all, because what's interesting is that my agenda, my schedule changed a lot. I have way less meetings than before. Like I had a lot of one-on-one meetings, and actually I can dive much deeper in the product, like back in the days. And so I see a lot of things that we could do better. I see a lot of things where I think I can provide relevant feedback. So I actually think I give much more feedback than before. And I'm still very involved in how we design our product. But generally I'm less involved in the production and in how we make features and how we build Conto. But I provide more feedback in general. And I just think that now we have lead product managers who are there to do that part. So I fully trust them, and I fully trust our PMs to do great things. And I just think when I can deep dive, I grab the occasion and I just try to help. But I think I'm much more I pay much more attention to all the details in our product now than I used to when I was head of product.
Yeah, same feeling. Yeah. I never had so much clarity of thought that I had since a few months. Cool. Maybe for 55-minute time flies. Maybe you have more question, topic we haven't touched on, anything we have. I would love to wrap in 5 minutes. But if you have question, happy to take them. Otherwise, we'll let it go from here. No further question. That's all right. We already had a lot. Thanks.
Theo.
Hello, Theo. You know Theo?
Theo is a former product manager at Conto who now works at Stripe.
That's the.
And he was when I was mentioning the PMs we had in the beginning of the team. He's definitely. I mean, he brought a lot to the team and taught me a lot of things about product management. So.
Cool. Hello, Theo. Nice to meet you. So the question of Theo is: what are the core artifacts that you use to define and share to share the product strategy internally?
Trying to think of a good answer to that. So I just to give some background, I think we were. I mean, as we grew, we didn't really change the way we were communicating about our objectives as a company. So we would share things like financial goals, like other type of goals, like number of accounts, of premium accounts, and everything like that. But we were the more we grew, the least those things would speak to people. And at some point, I think there really was a need to be able to brought more down to earth goals and objectives we had to something that just people can just they can really understand it, they can feel the mission behind it, and something that and if we bring it back to product, it's really making sure that we do things for our users, and it's very different when you say like we're going to help our users doing this or that then we're doing this so that we'll get our MR to X.
It doesn't translate, like it's not easy for PM to take it immediately.
You need to translate it. And I think one interesting thing was really to have to cascade from those very high level objectives to things that are much more down to earth. And like, okay, so here's our main goal as a company. So what is what are the first obstacles we have to tackle together? And then from there, you get to a lot of options. Okay, and then you have to assess these options against each other, and then you have a number of models that can help you on that. And I think that's once you're able to describe this cascading of goals very clearly to everyone, then you've made great progress to express your vision and strategy to the team. And I think that's what we're trying to do now. And the interesting thing is the first functional impact it had on the team. We used to have squads that were really built around functional parts of our product, and now they are much more about customer initiatives.
Okay.
And that came from this. Yeah, we had a team in charge of cards and card payments, one team around transfers and direct debits, things very functional. And now teams would be around initiatives like expense management and how do we make sure that our clients spend as little time as possible on just dealing with their corporate expense, things like that, and where we have much more user-oriented goals. And they will still relate to financial goals, to other metrics like NPS, something like that, but at least we have this intermediate level that makes it much easier to just refer to it as PMs, and also anyone else in the company.
Cool. Yeah, I think I can plus one everything that has been said by Thomas. I think the cascading is super important because product strategy is only a piece of the global strategy. And if you want to achieve great things as a team, for example, let's say your marketing team push on something which is not the thing you are building, obviously you're going to create disalignment. And so obviously at the end, you may not succeed as much as you wanted. So I think that alignment and that cascading, so it starts really with the CEO and or the board, the executive group to really articulate the strategy, and next each function to articulate it in a very tangible way. I think also what I've observed recently is if you can manage to lift up the conversation from a catalog of features and prioritizing features and discuss more around prioritizing outcomes or main initiative you want to push to your customer, I think it really makes the discussion healthy, especially for us as we are not as involved in the execution as we might have been before. It's impossible for me to make a choice between feature A and feature B this day. However, I can give my opinion on is outcome A better than outcome B? As for example, should we chase, I don't know, a goal around adoption versus retention? Is a much more healthy and a good discussion for me to have rather than prioritizing a feature over another. So if you, with your team, you can lift up the discussion and cascade a clear strategy. And I think a strategy is as good as its execution and its iteration. I don't think a strategy is settled in stone and for years. It's a plan. We execute on the plan, we measure, we learn, and we iterate on the plan. And maybe we iterate slightly sometimes, and sometimes we make huge pivot on the plan. But I think that's how we succeed at the end of the day, because if we were on a highway and we were never looking back, we would not be succeeding.
Yeah, and I think one thing about how we share it, and because there is really this question on aligning everyone in the company around it. So far, the thing we're trying to do much more than before is bringing the voice of customers everywhere when we talk about product strategy. It's so we are doing, for instance, much more user interviews than we used to do in the past, so that we actually we can try to show to everyone in the company like how we can solve actual pains that our users are facing at the moment. And we want to be, when we talk about the product initiative, we want to be as detailed as possible and close to the gestures of our clients and what they actually do on a daily basis. We don't want some kind of general theory on to solve problems we should do this. Like, no, we want to get to the neck level deep into their problems. Like,
be very specific about the problem we solve.
Exactly show exactly what they do on a daily basis that's just painful for them and how we can help them, and not just we can help them save time on dealing with their corporate expense.
Yeah, it's fuzzy. It's a good baseline to start, but it has to be refined.
It's like I think it was in a book by Basecamp. Like, all the products want to be fast, frictionless, and sure. But you're never going to have a compelling product strategy if you stay at that level. You want to be really deep and at the level of the gestures of the customer.
What people buy is your expertise at the end of the day. Cool. We're over an hour. Hopefully, Theo, that answered your question. We had no further question, and I think that's a wrap anyway. Thank you, Thomas. I think it was really, for me, it was really enjoyable. I hope it was online as well. And thanks again for joining. See you soon.